As I mentioned earlier, there are several different models within the ISD framework. Here is an example from your textbook of a 7-stage model. This one is more comprehensive than some of the others that you will see. 7 steps is a lot compared to the ISD model, which only has 5 steps. We will look at that model at the end of this lecture video. Step 1 is to conduct a needs assessment. Step 2 is to ensure that trainees are ready for training. Step 3 is to create a supportive learning environment. Step 4 is to implement different features to ensure that transfer of training actually occurs. Step 5 is to create an evaluation plan. Step 6, towards the very end of this linear process, is when the training is actually conducted. Step 7 then involves evaluating the effectiveness of that training. Let's take a look at each one of these steps in more detail on the following slides. The first step of training design is to conduct a needs assessment. This involves a number of different analyses, including one at the organizational level, one at the individual level, and then one at the task level. All 3 of these analyses help us ensure that the organization has the resources to conduct training, that the training focuses on the right needs, and that the trainees have what they need in order to learn and transfer that learning to the workplace. Sometimes training is not the answer to a performance issue. A needs assessment helps us establish if training is even necessary, and if it is necessary, what specific behaviors should the training focus on. The next step of the process is to make sure that employees are ready for training. There are a number of different factors that we could examine. Some of the most important include trainees' basic skills. Can they read? Can they write? At what level can they read? At what level can they write? We might also consider their motivation to both attend training, to show up, but also their motivation to participate and to actually learn something from the training. And finally, we might also want to consider employees' attitudes toward training, toward the trainer, toward the topic. Any one of these factors could help us prepare the trainees more effectively for the training that they're about to participate in. If trainees do not have the basic requirements, they can't master the training content. Then we can provide pre-training options to get them caught up to speed so that they can join their peers and learn from the program. Step 3 is to create a learning environment that supports learning and encourages the transfer of training. One of the ways that we do this is to plan out the administration of training. This includes everything from pre-training to the learning event itself to post-training. One of the other things that HR managers and trainers try to do is to create a culture both within the training event itself and also within the organization to create a culture that encourages learning. In some organizations, like Google, for instance, it is clear from the moment you walk into the office building that learning is important to the organization. In other companies, it isn't so obvious. In fact, I have met many people who have never attended an employer-sponsored training session. All of their training and development experiences have occurred outside of the employer's walls. In order to make sure that learning happens and that learning is taken back to the job, employees need to be encouraged. They need to feel like this is something important, something that they need to participate in. If the top leaders do not consider training to be important, remember, the employees will take on a similar mindset. When we design the actual program, it is important that we use learning objectives, and those objectives should be tied to the objectives of the overall training and development system, as well as to the objectives of the business itself. It also helps when the training program covers material that is meaningful. Sometimes that connection is not obvious. It is up to the designers and the trainers sometimes to make the material more meaningful to the trainees. A supportive learning environment also provides lots of opportunities for practice and receiving feedback from trainers, managers, other trainees, and sometimes even customers. It is also helpful when training programs can provide role models, models of appropriate behavior. Together, these features allow us to create a space where trainees want to learn and where they can learn. Step 4 is more focused on the work environment, on making sure that trainees can take what they learn in training and use it on the job. There are a number of ways that we can do this, and we will learn more about these strategies later in the semester. I have two here on the slide, two of the most effective strategies that we can use. Number one is to make sure that managers and top leaders and even colleagues support learning, support transfer of training, and support training and development in general. If you've ever had a supervisor who grumbles or complains when the annual training or the quarterly trainings are instituted, then you know what it is like to work for an organization that does not support, that does not value learning. One of the other things that trainers can do is at the end of a training session, teach trainees what we call self-management strategies. And these are techniques that the trainers can use to help them remember training content and practice training content long after the learning event has ended. These self-management techniques are especially useful for employees who work in a culture that does not support learning. If you work for an organization that doesn't invest in training and development, then it's really up to you to learn new knowledge and new skills. Self-management techniques can help you do that. The next step in the training design process is to create an evaluation plan. We need to identify the criteria we are going to use to evaluate the effectiveness of our training program. And we need to do this before we ever even think about creating the actual learning event. Why? Because the evaluation plan helps tie the training program to the company's business strategy. There are a number of different things that we want to include in the plan. First and foremost, we want to identify the outcomes of the training program. At the end of the training, what are we hoping trainees are able to do? There are several different types of training outcomes. We might focus on cognitive outcomes. We might try to change attitudes, and hopefully we change behaviors. We also want to estimate the potential costs and benefits of our training program. Costs can include things like the training site rental, paying the trainers' salaries and benefits, paying trainees to not be at work and instead be at the training site, technology, equipment, materials, all of those things are part of a training program and they need to be included in the evaluation plan. When we think about benefits, we want to think about benefits for the individual, for the group or team, for the organization. When we discuss benefits with top leaders and other stakeholders in an effort to try to persuade them that this training program is in fact worth the money, when we talk about benefits, we need to try to quantify those benefits. We might say that a particular training program might change trainees' attitudes. Great. What does that mean for the organization? How much money are we going to save? How much more money are we going to make? How does the organization benefit from such a training? Once we identify the criteria we will use to evaluate the training, and once we have estimated the potential costs and benefits of the training, we can start to prepare to calculate return on investment, ROI. This calculation is extremely complex. There are a lot of components in an ROI calculation. We, of course, can't calculate ROI until we have conducted the training itself. But before we design the training program, we need to consider the different bits of information that we are going to need and make a plan for gathering that information. When many of us think about training and development, we think about the learning event. We think about a classroom or an online training setting. What many people don't realize is that the learning event is just one component of a much bigger system. This particular model does a good job of highlighting that, because it isn't until we get to the sixth step of 7 that we even begin to talk about the actual training, the actual learning event. In the sixth step, we begin to design the content, choose the methods that we're going to use, maybe a combination of both traditional and technology-based training methods. We create learning objectives for the training session. We prepare the learning environment. We design training materials. We train the trainers. We invite the trainees, and so on. And finally, after all of that, we deliver the training. In the final step of the process, we evaluate the training. We monitor trainees' performance after training to see if transfer occurred. We try to determine the strategic value of the training using return on investment and cost benefit analysis. Both of these tools are useful to top leaders because they connect the single training event or the training system to the bigger picture, to the organization's strategies, goals. We evaluate the actual costs and the actual benefits of the training and compare that to our predictions. We use that information then to make changes to the training. Now that we've reached the end of step 7, one might think we are finished designing the training program, but that's not necessarily true. Many people take issue with the linear approach to training design, suggesting that it doesn't accurately represent what we are doing in the real world. Here we have an illustration of the ISD model. It is a cyclical approach to training and design, suggesting that the beginning and the end are sometimes ambiguous. ISD is an acronym for the 5 stages of this particular model: analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. ISD. Regardless of the model we use, all of these are going to identify needs assessment, training design, and training evaluation. These 3 basic steps form the foundation for the project in this class. You will conduct a rapid needs assessment. You will design a training program. You won't actually conduct the training, and you will create an evaluation plan.